pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Yusuf currently serves as the Executive Director of Discovery Immunology at Mirador Therapeutics, where she oversees target evaluation and validation efforts for inflammatory diseases. Before joining Mirador, she held executive and senior director position at Architect Therapeutic and Gossamer Bio, where she led cross-functional team and helped transition multiple programs from discovery to clinical development. Earlier in her career, she conducted research at Novartis Genomic Institute and MedImmune AstraZeneca, contributing to several therapeutic programs that advanced into clinical trials. Dr. Yusuf earned her PhD in molecular biology and biochemistry from UC Irvine, where her research focused on FOXO transcription factor and B-cell regulation. Her work has been published in top journals, including Science Translation Medicine and ACTA, Neuropathologica Communication. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Isharat Yusuf.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Kalani, and thanks, Miriam, for that really nice introduction. It is my pleasure to be here. As Miriam said, I graduated from UC Irvine with my PhD in 2005, so 20 years ago. Time flies. From MB&B, I was in David Fruman's lab, so it's really great to be here with you guys, fellow anteaters. And then hopefully next time we can do this in person. So I will start sharing my slides. Okay, let me put this in slide mode. Okay, do you guys see it? Good, okay, sounds great. So today I want to keep this fairly informal. As I think there was a flyer that was sent out, and a couple of the topics that we wanted to cover today was how to build your network, how to find mentors in industry, and then how to accelerate your career growth, but not it doesn't have to be kind of limited to those topics. So wherever we're going to reserve a big chunk of time for question and answers, and anything that you can think of related to transitioning to industry or in industry, your what is like in industry, or what is like in pharma or biotech, any type of questions that you can think of. I'll be happy to address towards the end, and I'll keep my actual presentation fairly short because I do think the question and answer sessions are what's really helpful, I think, for most people. Okay, so just starting here, I'm going to go through the way I'm going to present it is I'm going to go through the background and then really kind of talk about in each point what were my learnings with those three main topics in mind: about mentorship, about building a network, about advancing your career. But again, it doesn't have to be towards the end limited to those topics. So this is just a kind of an overview of how I see my career. It really has been an adventure. I am very passionate about immunology, and I'm very passionate about drug discovery. And this is something that I'll talk about and how I got into it for personal reasons. But it has been an adventure. It's been actually a beautiful journey. And I've done have been fortunate enough to do a lot of different types of things during my industry career. I've worked on the adaptive immune system, but I've also worked on the innate immune system. Two very different ways of looking at things from when you're trying to target these pathways to develop drugs. I've worked on, and I'll talk more about this, large molecules as well as small molecules. So large molecules are antibodies, whereas small molecules are usually oral oral pills. So again, lots of learnings here, but even in between the large and small molecules, there are different modalities. For example, you have just your standard monoclonal antibody, or you have fusion proteins that are not antibodies, or you have these antibody drug conjugates that are large, an antibody conjugated to a small molecule, and so on and so forth. So that I've had the good fortune to be able to work on multiple different modalities, and even within small molecules, there are different types of molecules that I've had the experience working on. There are ones that bind to the target reversibly, and then ones that bind irreversibly. Again, very different ways of approaching all of these modalities. And then there's, of course, there's the added uh, diversity of the different types of indications that you can work on. I started in the autoimmunity inflammation field. This has been something that I've been really passionate about due to personal reasons. But in the course of working on one of my targets, I was able. I had the opportunity to work on oncology as well, and then within that, immuno-oncology as well as what we call targeted oncology. And then I've also had this over the last 15, 16 years of doing this. I really started mainly as a drug discovery scientist, where I worked in the very early stages, in the preclinical stages. But because, again, of good fortune and opportunities that came up, um, as the drugs I was working on, or the targets I was working on, moved towards the clinic, I was able to follow them into the clinic. And I'll talk about that as well. And all of these experiences are kind of part of this really exciting journey. Okay, so here's just a timeline, and I'll kind of show you what my detail, what my journey has been. So I got my bachelor's degree at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, just up north. And this is, as you may know, it's in the Cal State system, so there's not a lot of opportunities to do lab work. So it's mainly focused on uh, learn by doing, but where you have labs, but there are not a lot of professors who are doing their own research, where you can have the opportunity to be an undergrad researcher. So that was kind of an interesting place to start, because right around while I was getting my bachelor's degree in microbiology, my mom was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. In fact, when she was first diagnosed, it was something that we couldn't figure out at the time what it was, and it took the doctors about 2 years to figure out the actual diagnosis. So there were a lot of different treatments that I saw her go through, from non-specific, steroids, prednisone, all the way to the time that she then later got a targeted, more specific therapy, which is an anti-TNF, which completely, changed her quality of life. So this was, to me, extremely inspirational. And I saw kind of the journey that she went on, and how a drug like this anti-TNF, which eventually she was on this drug called Humira, as you guys may be familiar with, had changed her, not just her life, but our lives as well as her caretaker. So this is kind of what inspired me to go into industry. And at the time, because Cal Poly didn't have this undergrad research opportunity, I started by doing a couple of summer internships in the San Diego area at this small biotech called Kanji, where we were doing gene therapy at the time, and which was acquired by another company, a pharma company called Sharing Plow, which eventually became Merck. So this was my introduction to industry, and I fell in love with the whole process. And then what people there advised me is that go back and get your PhD if you want to continue in industry. And that's what I did. And I joined UC Irvine in 2000, joined David's lab, and David was just starting his lab at the time, and it was a perfect place for me because I already knew that based on this what I what my seeing my mom's journey through this autoimmune inflammatory disease, that's the area I wanted to work on, and I wanted to be working on immunology. So in David's lab, I got my first introduction to immunology research, working on B cells, focused really on B cells, and then again. I felt even more in love with the field of immunology from this experience. And then I wanted to continue working in the immunology space, but then I wanted to get more. In David's lab, we were doing a lot of signaling work in the PI3 kinase, FOXO signaling pathway. But then I wanted to learn more cellular immunology, but kind of stick to the whole B cell theme. And so I went back to San Diego and joined the La Jolla Institute for Immunology, joined Shane Crotty's lab. And then there, I did my postdoc for about 3.5 years. And we were, at the time, we were very fortunate to then be one of the first labs to identify this new T cell subset that we call T follicular helper cells now. So it was, again, a very fun and exciting time to be in that lab. Making these discoveries. But then at that time, actually kind of was kind of at a crossroads in my career. I knew I started my PhD and my postdoc knowing I wanted to go into industry, but then I kind of had some doubts about do I really want to pursue that path, right? So I think this is an example of, sometimes things don't always go as you planned. So at that time, I started really exploring other options, career options. Industry was one of them. But then I was wondering, well, what about regulatory or just patent law? Like, my mom was a lawyer, so I was always kind of interested in law too. Like, how are these going to be some options that might work for me? Should I explore them? So that's kind of what I did. I wanted to take a little bit of time and think about it. And then, so after my postdoc, I actually joined the FDA. And then there were a couple of reasons. Is that my husband at the time had moved to the East Coast to do his postdoc at the NIH. And then I also well, obviously wanted to move to Maryland. And we had an existing collaboration going between Shane's lab and a lab at the FDA. So I joined that lab to really find out if regulatory is something that I would be interested in. And it was my postdoc mentor Shane was actually really supportive of this. He's like, just take the time to explore. So I did that, and as you can see, I was at the FDA for 4 months because I very quickly realized that it was not for me. But I'm glad I did that because it was a good learning experience. So then I said, okay, I think I really do want to be a drug discovery scientist in industry, and then was very fortunate to join this company called MedImmune, which had just been acquired by a big pharma company called AstraZeneca. And this was my first, and they were based in Maryland. The headquarters were in Maryland, so that worked out really well. Um, and this was my first entry level job. So it's a scientist one job where you start as an individual contributor. And then I joined the group, the autoimmunity and inflammation group. And then again, this is where I think I will focus a lot of my time today on about what learnings I got from this experience, because I think this will probably be most helpful for you guys as you're thinking about this type of transition into industry. But from there, I spent about close to 5 years at MedImmune, and from there, I think it was a time for a change. And we also wanted to move back to San Diego. So I joined this. It's called GNF, but now the name has been completely converted to Novartis. So it is part of the Novartis research umbrella, or what we call NIBR. And where I joined as an investigator two. You'll see that every company has their own way of naming the different career ladders. So here, I think investigator two is like a scientist two, so it's not the entry level position. So I joined the immunology department there, and some of the new opportunities that I got there was going from an individual contributor from MedImmune to being a team lead. I had a small team of 2 to 3 people. And then I also got the opportunity to be a project lead. And so this is a pretty big opportunity in industry that I was very fortunate to get very early on. So then from so this was again a moment for me to kind of think about what I wanted to do with my career. So it's had been kind of 9 years in industry already, and it's had been spent mainly in the big pharma space, right? So and I was really curious about what biotech was like. So that is kind of what I wanted to do next, what I thought would be my next challenge. So I joined this company called Gossamer Bio. It was a startup, but a different type of startup because they had already had their Series A funding. Their startup money was actually a substantial amount. So there was, they got to a mid-sized company very quickly. So it wasn't like a company of 10 people. So it was biotech, but it was not necessarily like a tiny startup. So there I joined the group as an associate director, and then when at the by the time I left, I was senior director. But the new opportunities that I got there was in addition to being a project lead for one of the projects, I was a functional head. So, and then we can kind of go through what these different roles are. So now I'm not just responsible for my team and the project, but I'm responsible for this a particular function. In this case, it was in vitro pharmacology, which my team and myself were responsible for supporting all of the programs across the pipeline, not just the project that I was leading. So this is where you really learn how to work in a matrix environment, and this is how most biotechs work, and it's different from pharma, which can be a little bit more like you are focused on your department. You're kind of a little bit more siloed. So those are some of the differences. So from Gossamer, and I'll tell you the story about why I had to leave Gossamer because there actually were the whole R&D team was laid off, and we'll talk about. And this is actually something that happens very commonly in the industry, so something you have to be prepared for. So this we went through the layoffs, and then I found myself in the job market, and I had opportunities right now at that point to go back to pharma. And I had an offer from one of the big pharmas, and I had an offer from this tiny little startup company called Architect. And I chose to stay with the biotech in the biotech space and join Architect, which again I'll talk to you later about in more detail so you understand some of these differences. Architect was actually a platform company, which is very different from Gossamer, even though they're both biotech companies, where Gossamer didn't have a particular platform, but Architect had its own specific platform. And we can talk about how that can um, impact what you work on. So at Architect, I was there for about a year, and I had to kind of uh, think about maybe my next move there. I had some, personal things that I had to with my family that I had to pay more attention to, and this environment was at that time very, very intense because a company of 10 people. Um, so it was, not the right time and fit for me. So then I decided to leave that role, and then I joined a few months later this other company, another startup called Mirador Therapeutics, which is where I am right now. Um, and where I am leading the discovery immunology group, and we're building a pipeline here. My group is really responsible for the building the actual pipeline for this company. And then as a head of discovery immunology, I'm the functional lead. And then also I'm now the manager of other project leads rather than just being a project lead. So which also changes your role, where you're thinking more strategically about the company's pipeline, and thinking more externally. So that's kind of a snapshot of my journey. So next, I wanted to take some time really about my time at AstraZeneca and MedImmune, because this was my first industry job. Yes, I did a couple of industry internships, which were great, and I learned a lot about what the industry setting is like. But as your first full-time job, it's really, where most of the learnings will happen. And just a little bit of background about MedImmune, just so you know kind of what kind of environment I came into. MedImmune, so AstraZeneca, as you may know, is one of the big pharmas, and AstraZeneca didn't have their own biologics group at the time. They were very small molecule oriented, and they acquired MedImmune, which was at the forefront of biologics development. At the time, I think other than Genentech, MedImmune was really one of the companies that were leading the biologic space and tech from the technology perspective. So in 2005, MedImmune was acquired for about $16 billion by AstraZeneca. At the time, their major products were Synagis, which is an anti-RSV antibody, and then Flumis, which is the nasal flu uh, vaccine. But then they had a very robust pipeline of biologics, and they, like I said, they were one of the leaders of protein engineering, where they discovered some of the effector null mutations, as well as ways to enhance the effector function of an antibody, but also ways to enhance the half-life. So a lot of things that people in the biologic space used now commonly were discovered at MedImmune. So it was really an exciting space and company to come into as a scientist. So there I joined the respiratory inflammation autoimmunity group. As you know, this is autoimmune inflammation disease were my passion, what I always wanted to do. And the key learnings that I got from the science perspective is I had exposures to multiple indications. Lupus, Sjogren's, and multiple sclerosis were the main areas that we focused on, that my group focused on. I worked very heavily on the CD19 depleting antibody, to try to understand its mechanistic, how it worked mechanistically, and how it differentiated from other B cell depleting antibodies like rituximab. So here I learned very quickly that when you're developing a drug, you need to make sure it's that well differentiated, but from standard of care. And then I also worked on the CD40 ligand blocking molecule that we developed. There, I learned a lot about and modeling human therapeutics in mouse models, and those were some of the challenges we faced, because a lot of biologics are not rodent cross-reactive, so you have to find creative ways to do your in vivo studies. And then some of the other programs that I worked on were this anti-interferon receptor antibody, which is now approved for lupus, and is called anifrolumab, and then some additional targets in this whole autoimmune space. And then this is really what I had focused on, was this CD19 antibody that was really engineered to be of a high affinity and high effector function molecule. And I was actually really fortunate because people work decades on something, and you have a decade-long career in industry and never get to work on a drug that gets approved. But I was fortunate that our CD19 antibody did get approved. And this was actually, I left MedImmune in 2014. And this was approved in 2019 for neuromyelitis optica. So this was a kind of an MS-like disease, if you're not familiar. So this was really exciting and rewarding to have worked on something that is now in patients. And then this actually antibody was then acquired by Amgen from AstraZeneca, and they're continuing to move this forward. Amgen is moving it forward in other indications, and I think just also got approved for a second indication, which is IgG4 related diseases, and they are also testing this in SLE. So it's really, I've been following this very closely, and so was very fortunate to be part of this team. So that was my learnings in science. But what did I learn outside of science? What did I learn about how to build your career? Because there's so much that happens that is, beyond just the science. So one of the first things that I learned is, what do you do when your manager is not a mentor, right? So my manager was great. At MedImmune, he was able to give me guidance from the scientific perspective, but I mean, certainly not a mentor, like the type of mentor that you would look for to guide for guidance on how to continue to grow your skill sets, how to grow as an industry scientist. So I had to get creative. I had to look beyond my immediate team and seek out new opportunities. And how did I do that? So you look around. I looked around and I saw uh, who were at my manager's level, some of the other group leaders, perhaps, and what how are they interacting with their teams? And I noticed that there was one person there in the larger group who was really seemed like he was a good mentor for his team, and provided them with opportunities outside their day to day. So I actually approached this person and said, "Hey, can I be involved with some of the work that you're doing? I know I'm not in your group, but I would love to, learn from you. And can I, contribute something to some of the work that you're doing?" And he was running this task force for lupus for SLE, and he's like, "Yes, you can, join this task force and help us out." And in this process, I really, got to know him, and he provided a lot of guidance to me. And over the years, at the time at MedImmune, but over the years, and I still reach out to him every now and then for guidance. So that's one way to find a mentor. Look around and see, who you think will be able to do this for you, provide you with what you need. And they don't have to be in your group. Um, and then we call it a support group. We formed something called a support group. But what it was is like a group of us bench level scientists, scientist one, that would get together occasionally, and we would brainstorm ideas about, how we could learn more about the business and some of the other aspects of drug discovery, and we would kind of help each other out. And it was really helpful to have this group and come together every every week almost in the evenings, and it was just it was so it doesn't have to be basically someone who's senior to you. Like your mentorship, your guidance, your network can also be people who are your peers. And then I actually started requesting one-on-ones from my manager's manager. And we would meet monthly instead of, I met with my manager on a weekly basis, but I would meet with her monthly. And she actually um, is what who I would consider now my main mentor in industry. And I have known her now for 13 plus years, and I have never made a career decision without getting advice from her. And every time, I have, and we keep in touch, we kept in touch over the years, and this turned out to be such an incredible relationship. And if I hadn't just approached her and said, "Can I just meet with you because I want to learn from you?" This would not have happened. Um, and then I started looking outside of AstraZeneca MedImmune, and I joined this. There are many of these groups. This is the group that I joined. It was called the Healthcare Business Women's Association. It was very active in the Maryland area. I joined this group. They had formal mentorship programs that I started with. I started they 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 assign, you go through a 6 month process where they assign you a mentor, and you check in with them every couple of weeks, and you go through this process with them, and you have certain things that you need to work on. You set out your goals, and then they help you with that. So this was like this formal kind of mentorship, where I got to connect with senior leadership from other institutions. So this was kind of also very helpful, and by doing this, we were actually able to bring this HBA mentorship program back into MedImmune, and offer that to all of the people at MedImmune. So that's another uh, ways to approach mentorship. And then I just want to share with you a piece of advice that I think has been super helpful for me over the last several years. And drug discovery is something my mentor that I just talked about, my manager's manager at the time, told me that in industry, you really have to be, if you're thinking about like how best to um, contribute and how best to succeed, you have to be a jack of all trades. Try to learn about as many diseases and as many functions as you can. The more that about other functions and diseases, the better you are as a drug discovery person. And this was very different to me coming from a postdoc or PhD program, where you're really focused, right, on one question, one project. But here you have to be kind of you don't have that in-depth knowledge, but you try to learn as much as possible across different indications and functions. So I think that has really kind of been a piece of advice from my mentor that has I've kept in mind and been helpful in my journey over the years. So thinking of that piece of advice that she gave me, then although MedImmune was fantastic place as a scientist, um, I wanted to do something different. It was a biologics company, so I wanted to learn about small molecules. How do you do drug discovery for small molecules? So then I joined Novartis, or GNF at the time, where I really got exposure to multiple different things. So here, um, I um, I was able to work on the autoimmunity space, but also started working on immuno-oncology space. And then I also learned a lot about high throughput screening, because with molecules you make thousands of molecules at a time, and biologics are a lot smaller scale. So we had this high throughput screening capabilities. So I learned about how to do that. I so my scientific learnings there at Novartis were switching from large molecule to small molecules to learn something new, learn high throughput screening, I had worked with protein engineers and protein chemists at MedImmune. Now I was learning how to work with medicinal chemists. So this is also very important in this industry because you're interacting with people. You're a biologist, but you're interacting with chemists, you're interacting with statisticians, and we all speak different languages. So learning how to work with these functions is very important. So now I had to learn a different language and how to speak with the medicinal or have conversations with them and work with them. Um, and then, of course, I had this was where I got my project leadership opportunity for the first time, and which was also very different because this was now you're working with a cross-functional team, like I talked about, people who are chemists, people who are toxicologists. So you and the added challenge here was that this because Novartis is a very large company, these teams were spread out across different states. We had, people in Cambridge, Mass, and then we had people in Basel, Switzerland. So the teams were actually different countries and states. So that also added a level of complexity as far as, so I learned very quickly that communication was key. So what were my non-scientific learnings here? Here I started, like I said, was my first experience managing a team. And now I had to start thinking about like, how can I be a mentor to others? How can I be a mentor to my team? Do I have a development plan for them? So if go to your first job, you should ask your manager, do you have a development plan for me? What does that look like? This is what I want to achieve. What do you think? So these are conversations that I think one should always be having with their managers. Um, and then another piece of advice that I can give that I learned starting very early from MedImmune to Novartis is you're keep building your network. Keep keep in touch. Like I kept in touch with all my colleagues at MedImmune, and I still keep in touch with them. Keep in touch with everyone. That's the way to build your network. And then your network doesn't just have to be limited to the people that you worked with. So from this early on in my career, I got to know a couple of recruiters actually. And, usually recruiters work with more senior level people, but somehow I, was able to connect with them and I just kept talking to them. And there are two recruiters that I like that I feel like I have actually now a very close relationship with. And they check in with me every 6 months and say, "Hey, are you interested in new opportunities?" I'll say yes or no, and or they'll check in with me and say, "Hey, I have this role. I know you're not interested, but can you recommend someone?" So it's just like a two-way relationship, and this can actually also be very helpful to invest in these types of relationships. So from Novartis, I told you I made a pretty big switch going from um, big pharma to biotech. I really wanted to understand what the entire drug discovery process looked like. In pharma, things move a little bit slower. So I was very much focused on this early part of the pipeline where I've done target ID, target validation, hit and lead ID, lead optimization, and I was really kind of hovering in the space, and I wanted to experience what this transition looked like and what clinical development was like. So I joined this biotech. Um, and then I was co-leading the biology group there and learning about what it's like to build a pipeline, and also all of with the functional role like co-leading a department, you have to not just manage a team or lead programs, but you also have to then think about fun stuff like budget. So I got to learn a little bit about that. How do you set your budget for the year, for the next year, for the next 3 years? So again, with a lot of great experience here at Gossamer, working in a matrix environment, um, being kind of this functional lead, and leading a large group. and many programs instead of one program. And then again, this being a jack of all trades comes very is a good piece of advice, because in the process of the program that I was working on, I switched from working on multiple sclerosis to lymphoma, and I didn't know anything about lymphoma at the time, so I had to learn everything about what this disease space looked like, what it was like to develop a drug in CNS lymphoma. But I think that was a really helpful experience. But I did learn a lot of life lessons from my experience here as well. And I'll tell you what my first biotech experience, what I learned at some of the main points. Biotech is not pharma. It's very different, and we can talk a little bit more in detail about later, and maybe in follow-up conversations about what these differences are. But in biotech, you have a short amount of time to deliver what you said you're going to deliver, because you have a finite amount of funding, and you have to deliver in that time. So it's a very fast-paced environment. It's a matrix environment. Speed really is the key to success here. Again, like I said, working in a matrix environment, communication is key more than ever. And here you learn very quickly that everyone in the company is part of the same team. Even if you have multiple programs, if one program succeeds, you all succeed. So you have to start thinking about this in a very different way. And then most importantly, I learned that success is not a guarantee. We always say that the real experiment's going to happen in the clinic. So that's where you'll find out if your drug is successful or if it fails. And a lot of times it'll fail. And that's kind of what happened. We had built a great pipeline. We um, built a great team, because we had some clinical failures here. The entire research team was laid off, and including my entire team, myself, and my manager. So this was quite a moment for me, a learning experience. And so you say, what do I do next? And that's when you use your network, right? I reached out to everyone in my network and said, hey, um, I'm open to opportunities. Can you please help me? Can you think of anyone who's looking, if you're not looking for anyone? And then, do you have any opportunities for my team? So it was my responsibility also, if I felt, to find opportunities for them, and I would reach out to my network on their behalf. Um, Again, for the interest of time, I'm going to go through this very quickly. So I think I told you earlier, I was fortunate to have few opportunities come up when I was looking at the time, and I chose to go with this one opportunity, which was a platform company, where they had a novel chemistry platform. And just want to kind of quickly tell you the difference here. A platform company is where you have a specific platform, the name suggests. So it is, you try to you work on your specific unique platform, um, but you can be disease agnostic, right? So I kind of very quickly learned that maybe companies is environment isn't for me. I really, really like to focus on immunology and um, autoimmune inflammation space. And again, I actually wasn't even looking at the time, but I had someone from Mirador reach out to me and ask me about references for people who were in my team, and then that's how we kind of this opportunity came up for myself. So I joined Mirador, which is right now is for me a great place to be, because I consider this opportunity of a lifetime, because I'm working in the IBD space. And remember, I started in this journey because of my mom's Crohn's disease. So I'm very, again, passionate about what we're doing here, where we're trying to develop a precision immunology company where you try to identify drugs that work in a patient subpopulation, and just being in an environment for with surrounded by very successful people who've done this successfully because they were the founders of Prometheus. So again, very exciting time for me and back working on what I'm very passionate about. So that's kind of all I had, from a presentation perspective. But I really wanted to take some time to make sure that I addressed your questions. Um, so I don't know if there are questions that have popped up in the chat, or if you guys want to just chime in. But as an icebreaker, I did receive two questions that came in earlier from some of you, and I can kind of start that with that. So one, and then I can maybe see if anyone wants to answer what take a stab at the answer. But one of the questions that came up is it good to focus on building your network relationships primarily with people who have hiring power if you want to work with that company later? So I don't know if anyone wants to try to answer that, or I can, see, take a couple of seconds and see if anyone wants to take a stab at what the answer is or what you think it is. Okay. It's okay. Maybe I'll just start by answering. This question is, no, I think that's the approach that one should take is build as wide a network as possible. Just, make sure you keep in touch with your peers. Like I said, my scientist one support group, recruiters, because if you want a job at a company, um, it doesn't have to be the hiring manager. What you have to make sure is that your CV gets to the hiring manager. Sometimes if you just apply and it just gets lost in this HR, process. So what you can do is if there's a person who's not the hiring manager but isn't it even in a different department, if they can get your CV to the hiring manager's desk, that already puts you ahead of all of the people who applied online. So I think you should think as widely as possible. Um, so another question that came up was, how do I know what are some of the best skills to acquire during my PhD in this uncertain time and changing job market? And I think this is just a pretty consistent thing. I think the things that are valued in industry is ability to multitask, knowing things outside of your area of expertise, collaboration, and understanding how to work in a matrix environment, which means that working with people who are not directly reporting to you or are not in your reporting structure. So I think I'll stop there because I want to take questions from you guys. So
Thank you so much, Dr. Yusuf, for the insightful and inspiring presentation. We have one question here in the chat from Michael. So the question is about, can you comment on what abilities or skill are most in demand in biotech and pharma right now
mhm.
that change drastically in the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a good question, and kind of related to that second question. I think that showing that you have uh, been successfully collaborating, like even in your PhD or your postdoc, if you're working on a certain project, but you have a collaboration maybe outside your institution or across another lab, because those are some of the key skills that one needs. So I think that's something that can be worked on during your education. And then communication. There's a lot of presentations that need to be one needs to do in industry. So your presentation skills are very important, and during the interview process, you will also have a job talk that you'll have to do. So I think that's where people kind of look for how is this person's communication skill, because we're constantly having to make slides and present in front of the executive leadership and externally, internally. So I think that is a very important skill set.
Thank you so much. Yeah, communication is very important in industry, especially
Mhm.
delivering the project outcome and all of
Yep.
these things involving the process. If anyone has a question, please feel free to unmute or type your question in the chat. I have one here.
Hi, I actually had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hi, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for the great talk. I just wanted to ask you about your regulatory experience at FDA, and if you could elaborate a little bit more about how the experience was and what
Mhm.
exactly made you realize that it wasn't for you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, so I joined the FDA as an ORISE fellow, and that's actually really, if you guys, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's kind of uh, like a program that they have. It would be equivalent to a postdoc, where it's like for a set amount of time, you get to do a little bit of research, but you also get exposure to doing the regulatory work. I think it's a great place to start if you're interested. That's how I joined. And but I think I've just very quickly learned that doing reviews and uh, was not something that interested me. I really wanted to be doing some of the hands-on work. I wasn't ready to transition from the bench. So then that that was kind of a key driver for me. It's just I liked being at the bench. So
Thank you.
mhm. Yeah, great question.
We have two questions in the chat, but I will start with the question I have right now. You mentioned times when your team was laid off and how you used your network afterward. Did you ever have a gaps between jobs, and how did you use that time and your connection to move forward?
Hmm. Another excellent question, because this is, I'm going to be pretty honest. This is pretty common, right? People, like when I went through this at Gossamer, people were like, "Oh, this is the first time this is happening to you. Then you're pretty lucky," because it happens quite frequently, whether you're in pharma or whether you're in biotech. It is just part of part of life. But yeah, so how did I use my network? I reached out on LinkedIn to because I had been working on building my LinkedIn network by connecting, keeping in touch with all of my ex colleagues. So I reached out to many of them, and the big pharma opportunity that came to me was because when I was at MedImmune, we had a collaboration with Amgen, and the hiring manager was an ex Amgen person, and they remembered that connection. So that's kind of how I got one of the opportunities there. So it's very like you can never predict how that's gonna work out. So having that network and just not being shy about reaching out to them. And then I also like reached out to my colleagues, not just people who were at that like the first question, right? At who had hiring abilities. Just kind of I reached out to everyone, and then at the end, it was my old mentor who kind of was just talking to someone, and then said, "Oh, that there's this company starting called Architect. It might be a good fit for you. Why don't you talk to them?" And that's kind of how that worked out. So yeah, hopefully, was there a second part of that question, right?
Yeah, it was only one part of the question.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much for answering it. We have here two questions in the chat. The first one is, hi, Dr. Yusuf. Thank you so much for time and presentation. I am wondering if you have any advice in transitioning from PhD to biotech directly. What's the best way to get our applications noticed? Do you recommend cold
Yeah.
contact?
My advice would be you have a couple of options. You should consider maybe an industry postdoc. Um, I would say that the first industry job is the toughest one to get because people in industry are always looking for industry experience, but how are you going to have industry experience if you don't get your first job, right? So one way to do that is to consider an industry postdoc. They tend to be shorter, 2 to 3 years. They, you may not or may not publish, but you have that industry experience. You get exposed to this industry environment, so that's very helpful. And then if you want to go straight from your PhD to industry, I think cold contact is fine, but try to leverage any network that you have. I think explore that option first before submitting your CV online, maybe, because that might kind of get lost in some, process. But if you notice someone that even is indirectly connected to you on LinkedIn is at the company, maybe use your other connection to introduce you to that person.
Thank you. We have one last question here in the chat from Michael. Do you have any advice for securing an initial industry role soon after graduation, breaking into the industry?
Yeah. Again, so I think the market is pretty tough right now. So just be open to different options. Like I said, like a postdoc is a great option in industry. But maybe if there are temp position, people do that. They do like 6 month temp contract positions in industry, and that may be a temp position, but that counts as industry experience. So maybe just be a little bit more kind of open to other options. But other than, like what I said, using your network um, is great. And maybe someone in your network, even though recruiters sometimes they don't usually work on entry level positions. Maybe if someone in your network says, hey, I know this recruiter, they can, help you out, um, because as a favor, and keep an eye out for things like that. So that's also an option. In fact, when we moved back from Maryland to San Diego, my husband didn't have a job. He just finished his postdoc, and the way he got his job is because I knew a recruiter who um, just passed his CV around to different companies, even though, she wasn't working on a particular opening. So I gave her his CV and said, and she just used her connections with different companies to just pass that CV around. So those are some of the kind of creative ways to approach the first position.
Great. Thank you all for attending. And thank you, Dr. Yusuf, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. And have a good day.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. And feel free to contact me later as well if you have questions.
Thank you so much.
Was there another question? Maybe you can type it. I think Yasmin, did you have a question if you want to type it?
If anyone has questions for the sake of time, you can feel free to email them to me at the GPS STEM email. I am the one that sent out all of the email reminders, so you can just reply to me and I can get it to Dr. Yusuf as well. So thank you all for attending, and thank you, Dr. Yusuf, and thank you, Dr. Miriam Falata, for co-hosting this event with us today. And I hope you all have a nice rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.